new details on what could ultimately decide the Republican nomination. The race some are calling the shadowy primary. Shadow primary. The candidates know that when they arrive in Cleveland this July, some uncommitted delegates will be able to vote for any candidate. That means that rounding up these delegates now could be the key to winning the nomination in a close fight. We have Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus with us on that, but for the first in a series of Kelly File reports on the convention in Cleveland, we go to our chief Washington correspondent, James Rosen, on the shadow primary. James?
Megan, good shadowy evening to you. The demands of this so-called shadow primary, the quiet wooing down at the state level of the men and women who will serve as delegates to the Republican convention this summer, are increasingly being reflected in the travel schedules of the two leading candidates. Wind from Wisconsin at his back, Texas Senator Ted Cruz heads on Saturday to the state GOP convention in Colorado, where he peeled away 6 delegates in congressional district assemblies this past weekend. GOP frontrunner Donald Trump is also planning to visit Colorado in coming days. Trump's team acknowledges that the Cruz operation is more evolved, that the billionaire real estate mogul is, quote, playing catch-up. But they also maintain that the state delegations are playing Ted Cruz.
What makes you think that when it gets to this third and fourth ballot that the Cruz folks are preying on, that they are not going to be voting for Mitt Romney or Marco Rubio or Paul Ryan or whoever it is? They're going to be like, Ted who? They're using Ted right now as a vessel to try to stop Donald Trump.
Convention delegates are usually local Republican activists, by definition creatures of the establishment. Indeed, in exchange for enduring the dreariest winter meetings, tinkering with arcane allocation rules and ballot issues, the largest reward they receive is their quadrennial attendance at the party convention. The number of delegates who become unbound surges from 5% on the first ballot to 59% on the second. Since these delegates are part of a local power structure that often includes a governor or a state party chairman and so on, some analysts question how unbound these delegates ever really become. Mercedes Schlapp takes a different view.
I do think that the delegate, since they've been so active in the party, they're going to have, they might be influenced somewhat by the state party officials, but at the same time, they're their own individual person who's going to decide straight on who they want to support.
And we also know that the RNC has been holding meetings with key operatives here in Washington to plot out the mechanics of a contested convention. And those meetings themselves, Megan, have been very, very shadowy.
That's the theme. James, great to see you.
Likewise.
Joining me now, Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being here. There's a shadow primary. So basically, I mean, this actually comes as news, I think, to a lot of people, which is, and it sheds a lot of light on Ted Cruz's belief that he can wrap up 1237 before he gets, to that first vote. And so the way he would need to do it, because he's probably not going to get 80% of the vote going forward, which is what he'd need, is to get these other delegates, like the delegates in Pennsylvania that aren't really bound. And you tell me whether he could also get Rubio and Kasich's delegates if those two guys got out, or at least Rubio's.
Well, certainly. I mean, it's sort of two different things going on. On one hand, you have the allocation of delegates, meaning when you win that state and candidate X gets 25 delegates, in most cases, those 25, no matter who they are, they could hate candidate X, but on 1 or 2 ballots, they're going to have to vote for candidate X. The same analysis is true for people who are unbound on the first ballot. So if a candidate is really, really close, they will have an opportunity, if there's a couple hundred unbound delegates on the first ballot, say Marco delegates or someone else's delegates, to then convince them to come on board on the first ballot.
Now already we're hearing complaints by the Trump camp that this election is going to be stolen from him. And we played the soundbite earlier of a longtime Donald Trump associate and former operative on his campaign, Roger Stone, who came out and said this, and he doubled down on it today. Listen.
If Trump does not run the table on the rest of the primaries and the caucuses, we're looking at a very, very narrow path in which the kingmakers go all out to cheat, to steal, and to snatch this nomination from the candidate who was overwhelmingly selected by the voters, which is why I have urged Trump supporters, come to Cleveland, march on Cleveland, join us in the Forest City. We're going to have protests, demonstrations, we will disclose the hotels and the room numbers of those delegates who are directly involved in the steal. Your
thoughts on that, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I mean, he's a smart person, but it's totally over the line. And we're going to have $50 million in security. We'll make sure that every delegate is safe. Here's the thing. A majority wins. A majority wins everywhere across this country. It's how our country was founded. It's what our founding fathers believed in. It was good enough for Abraham Lincoln. It's good enough in 2016. It's not a matter about well, who gets a plurality. It's about who gets a majority. You have to have a majority of delegates on the floor, and the delegates have the ultimate say, empowered by the voters in those states. So,
are you going to do anything to the rules if Trump or somebody else, for that matter, is 50 short or 100 short of 1237? Are you going to do anything to the rules to make it easier or harder for that person to get over the line?
I'm not going to do anything to either help or hurt anybody. I'm going to run an open, honest, and fair convention, and the delegates are going to decide, and the delegates, by majority, are going to make all the decisions that they need to make at the convention. It's the same thing we do every 4 years.
It's going to be an interesting July. It's great to see you, Mr. Chairman.